Number 10. About a year ago, I spent a decent amount of time working in a different city than I live in. One day was particularly cold, and the Airbnb I had booked was pretty far away. I didn't have a car, and I had failed to pack a warm coat. I ducked into the Kmart nearby to buy something I could wear on my walk, with the intention of returning it the following morning. My best option was this enormous extra large fuzzy bathrobe. My walk home led me through this beautiful botanic garden along a waterway. It was nearing midnight, and I was halfway through my journey. I'm usually quite aware when I'm out, particularly at night, but I had let my guard down a bit, due in part to the enormous bathrobe I had wrapped around me. It was like wearing a fuzzy suit of armor. Suddenly, I felt intensely uncomfortable. I couldn't quite put my finger on what I'd heard, but my immediate thought was a couple of males holding a whispered conversation. I rounded a corner and ducked into some trees, sucking my breath in and straining to understand what I was hearing. Light footsteps and voices came near. The two men neared my hiding spot on the path, and I internally berated myself for not being more careful. Nobody was out, so screaming would do nothing. I'm a very small female, so the situation was one of my worst nightmares. As they passed, I heard, "She's around here somewhere." I felt physically sick, until one of the guys let out a low whistle, and I heard the jingle of a collar. A dog scurrying past my spot, and a "good girl," followed by smoochy noises. An intense sense of relief followed. They were talking about their beloved dog, not hunting me. They seemed harmless, endearing even. I readjusted my bathrobe to cover my head, and it was so cold, and popped out from the trees. I didn't realize until I later looked at myself in a mirror that the bathrobe arms were now on top of my head, sticking out like some grotesque, bulbous monster appendages. I also didn't realize that the men had stopped or were walking very slowly only a few meters ahead on the path. One of the men screamed in terror when they saw my emergence from the trees. The other swore loudly, and they both took off running across the bridge over the waterway, followed closely by their dog, who was now barking frantically. I still have the picture I took of myself in the mirror after the incident, and I get the giggles every time I see it. Number 9. This happened a long time ago, when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I'm 27 now, and I didn't remember this until I was around 15. And after I did, I asked my mom if it was a real memory or just a dream. She confirmed it indeed happened, or at least the parts she knew of. I live in the Netherlands, and always have. The conversations were Dutch, which I will translate as much as possible. As a kid, I lived in a quiet neighborhood with around 100 houses. It was set up in sort of a big circle, with only one way for cars to enter, and only 2 other ways to enter by foot or bicycle. We lived on the part of the circle closest to the car entrance, which we called the front street. The other side of the circle we called the back street. On the back street side there was a small playground which could be easily seen from the houses there. It had 2 swings on this T-shaped blue swing set, a yellow climbing tool shaped like a snail, and a small football field with 2 goals. I was allowed to play outside on my own, but wasn't allowed to go to the back street by myself. I did so anyway that day and decided to go to the swings. There was nobody there when I arrived, probably as it was close to dinner time. I was wearing a blue dress, jeans I think, and those white tights little girls often wore in those days. I was playing around when suddenly 2 guys, which I now think were between 14 and 16, came up to me. I wasn't scared and figured they were just passing through, until one of them suddenly grabbed me from behind and held a pocket knife to my throat. I was of course very scared, and they started moving me further into the playground, to a part filled with bushes and out of sight from the houses. The one holding me then said, roughly translated, "Pull down your pants or I will slice your throat." At this moment I was really scared, and even then the first thought that occurred to me was, but I'm not even wearing pants. I was too scared to speak, and instead didn't move at all. Then seemingly out of nowhere his grip on me loosened, and I looked around and I saw why. A woman was walking down the street in front of the playground. I broke loose and ran to her, muttered out what just happened, and ran off again. When I got home a moment afterwards, I didn't tell my mom, because I was still too scared. I also thought I would get in trouble for going to the back street while she told me not to. so not telling seemed better. A few months later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to a woman of about my mom's age and a boy, one of the two boys from that day. I didn't say anything to them, left the door open and ran to my mom. I said to her, "That's him." She had no clue what I was talking about, so I quickly explained. She confronted them, the boy and apparently his mother, but he of course denied. As my mom couldn't be fully sure either, she didn't follow up on it. All in all, I think I'm very lucky for having gotten off so easily, and not realizing what kind of a situation I had been until many years later. Number 8. It was near Halloween time when my friends and I were telling ghost stories. My friend said that she was going to tell a story about her parents' first date. She said she didn't like telling the story since it was actually true, but we prodded her on. To cut to the chase, the parents had spent a nice, if awkward, first date, and around the time that they would have said goodnight, the male in my situation, who was my friend's dad, suggested that they go up for a midnight hike up Provo Canyon. He apparently knew the place since he had done a fair amount of rock climbing in the area. So the two drove up the mouth of the canyon, got out of their cars, and started hiking under just the light of the stars since it was a new moon. At some point, the male in the situation starts getting a bad feeling, since the pathway ahead, which would pass under some trees, would be dark, and because it was getting to be quite late. He ignores the feeling and presses on. A minute later, the feeling came back to the man. He ignored it again and started walking a bit of the way into the trees when his foot hit something soft in the middle of the path. Under the trees, it was too dark to see just what this soft thing was, and the feeling came back stronger than ever. Instead of finding out what his foot had bumped into, he and the female both agreed to hightail it out of there. Years later, after being married for some time, they were watching an interview with the serial killer Ted Bundy. In response to a question asking him to describe the time that he felt the closest to being caught, he explained about the night that he lured a girl into Provo Canyon and had just killed her when he heard some people coming up the trail. He explained how he hid in the trees just in time only to watch some guy walk right into the body, and for some reason just turn around and walk away. Number 7. I've lived in New York City all my life, and I have countless stories that I can tell you about this city, but this one takes the cake for sure. I live in one of the safest and most affluent neighborhoods in all of Brooklyn, near the Verrazano Bridge. My friends and I, being high school students at the time, would use fake IDs to get into this college bar in Manhattan most weekends. There is one train line that serves my neighborhood, and even then it's a decent walk to get to the nearest station. On this night, my friends and I left our neighborhood and boarded the train. Everything was totally fine on the way to the bar. It's one straight shot ride there, and we had a pretty decent time. I left the bar at around 3 in the morning, and my friends decided that they will all stay at one of my friend's grandparents' houses in the neighborhood next to mine as to not get caught by their parents, which was served by a different train line. We boarded the train headed toward my neighborhood, but my friends disembarked about 7 or 8 stations before I needed to get off so that they could transfer to the other train line. As I said before, my neighborhood is very affluent and most people do not use the subway and opt for cars instead. It's semi-suburban. Imagine a mix of New Jersey and a scene out of Saturday Night Fever. Therefore, I was the only person in my car. 2 stops after my friends left the train, a man wearing a stuffed black backpack entered the car and sat down in one of the corner seats next to an advertisement plastered on the wall. I paid little attention to him, but anyone boarding the train at 3 a.m. in my area would be kind of unnerving, especially because of his shabby appearance. Not homeless, but he definitely had not showered for a few days. My eyes stayed glued to my phone for about 5 minutes until my attention was ripped away from AFK Arena due to the man removing a large permanent marker from his backpack. He began writing on the advertisement and smiling at me every so often, as if he wanted me to acknowledge whatever he was scribbling down. The man began by drawing a hanged man with several religious crosses surrounding him, and then began to write phrases on the advertisement. The end is near. You will pay for your sins. The awakening is upon us, etc., etc. Normal things for a super religious person to say or write, even if it was unnerving that this was happening at 3 a.m. on an empty train car. I tried to shrug the situation off because I did not want to freak myself out, as I tend to overthink things like this. However, the next time I looked up at the advertisement, he had written, "Make sure you check behind you on your way home," and that gave me that unnerving smile At this point, I freaked the hell out. I was still semi-drunk, and my anxiety disorder was not helping anything to the situation at hand. I got up and moved to the opposite end of my car. My station was next, so I thought that I was just dealing with some loony and that I'd be fine. As I exited the train, the man exited as well. Now here's where I felt like I was really in danger. He was following me with a blank face. No smile, no making sure that I was paying attention to his actions. Just blank. I began briskly walking through my silent neighborhood. No one was out. It was 3 a.m. for God's sake. The man trailed behind me with his backpack my entire way home, and I made sure to double lock my doors once I got inside. I didn't tell my mom because I knew she would have had 10 times the panic attack that I did on that train. When I entered my room, I peered out the window. There the man was, staring blankly at my front door. He stood there for about 5 minutes before leaving, trailing off into the darkness. I have no idea what that man wanted from me or why he followed me off of the train. To this day, I still had to make myself believe that he simply was deranged or had some kind of mental illness, not that he had any sinister intentions. Number 6. So this was about 4 years ago. I was 11 or 12 and my friend was turning 10 or 11. It was about late summer. I live on the outskirts of a very small town in a small province in Canada. Everybody here knows each other. My friend decided to have a birthday sleepover outside in tents. We had the tents all set up in his yard and we had a battery-powered DVD player out there to watch movies, as well as chips, pop, etc. We were set. Around 12 at night we hear a truck go by. We don't think much of it, just somebody out for a late night drive. But 5 minutes later we hear the same truck. It made some kind of distant rattling noise. Again, we think nothing of it, just on his way home or something. Then we hear it again, and again, and again. At this point, we're kind of scared, but being the stupid kids we were, we got out of the tent and stood in the driveway. We wanted to see what was up. About 5 minutes later, the truck started to come by, but seeing people in the driveway, it slowed down and stopped beside us. The man was covered in tattoos and piercings, looked about mid-30s, had long black hair, and a Quebec license plate. We aren't from Quebec. And he had bulging eyes. We were all kind of frozen. The man looked us over and sped away. He didn't even say anything, but we were scared crapless, but figured he would leave us alone now. We went back to the tents. But oh, were we wrong. 5 minutes later, we heard the rattling and looked out to see this truck. Really old, and can't really remember what model, but it was green. At this point, we were shaking. We all rushed into the house and woke up my friend's dad. He got up, mumbled a bit, and went outside with us. Just as earlier, it was about 5 minutes when the truck came rolling by again. But this time, seeing an adult there, he stopped about 2 houses away, turned in their driveway, and sped away. He didn't come back after that. Nothing else happened. But that scared the hell out of me. Number 5. At the beginning of January of 2014, I met this guy on Omegle. He said his name was Valentine, but liked to be called Connor. He lived in Texas and he was my age. We chatted for a while, and right off the bat he was telling me how ugly he was and how his mother slapped him around and how he hated his little brother because of how rude he was. Being the overly compassionate and sensitive person I am, I felt bad for him, and that day we began dating. He told me how he was a Satanist, and I didn't really care, since I firmly believe in choosing whatever religion you feel comfortable with. Honestly, I think I should have took that as a warning. We were together for 3 months, and I got fed up with his bullcrap when he told me he was driving to my state to see me, and then stood me up. In our first month, we were on a Skype call, and he was in a dark closet with a single lit black candle, and he was reading demonic spells off of a notebook. When I broke up with him, he didn't contact me for months, and one day he did. He called me. I was a little weirded out by it, but I answered with a polite hello. "What are you doing?" It seemed like a fairly nice question, so no flags were raised. I replied with watching. He cut me off mid-sentence. "Cool, I missed you." I kinda rose a bit of an eyebrow at that and just shook it off. "Oh, cool?" I didn't know how to respond. "You know, I ran away 5 times to go to your house, but my mom caught me every time. I still have the bear you sent me for Valentine's Day. Remember it? I still sleep with it. Even though some relatives, I can't remember which one in particular, dog tore it up. His voice was a bit manic. "Oh, that's too bad, I'm sorry," I replied, a little creeped out. "I want to see you. I'll run away again for you." I was now on edge and replied with a quick lie. "I don't think my new boyfriend would like that." Valentine got real quiet and then hung up. I looked at my phone in confusion and shrugged and went back to watching what I was watching. Summer break was almost at the end now, and Valentine called me again. "Hey." He sounded weird. "Hey," I replied, preoccupied to really pay attention to him. "I need to tell you something. I'm going to do something bad," he whispered. I stopped what I was doing, listened to him. "What's wrong?" I asked. "When school starts again, I'm going to shoot my school up." I almost didn't believe him at first, so I asked what he meant. "Me and my friends have some guns already. When school starts, we're going to shoot up my middle school and kill everyone. I think Satan will be happy with my deeds." I immediately began talking him down, and at the same time I was texting my mother everything he said. After a half hour talking down to him, he got quiet and asked about my boyfriend. I lied and said that we had broken up, and Valentine seemed to be happy about it. He said that he wouldn't shoot anyone and hung up. My mother and I were debating whether or not to call the police and ended up not doing it. There was never any middle school shootings in Texas, so he never did it. But after that, he hasn't contacted me since. Number 4. I was around 14 years old, riding my bike at night, taking some photos, and decided to ride on top of a nearby mall to get a better view. There was no one there, and after around 10 minutes I went to go to the other side when someone pulled up in their car. They pulled up next to me and unrolled their window, asking if I'd like to buy their son's Xbox 360. I declined, saying I don't want one since I had a computer. He offered to bring me back to his house to look at it, and at the same time I didn't realize how terrifying the situation was and how badly it could have gone. The mall I was at had lots of cameras, so I assumed he was trying to make it look like I was leaving with him willingly, like I knew him, not getting kidnapped. I told him I didn't have any money for it and to have a good night. He went and pulled away to the ramp entrance to the parking garage above the mall, and after a while, I slipped away at the other exit. Number 3. A few years ago, I went on vacation with a friend to a resort in a popular spring break area. Although I was the typical spring breaker age, I avoided people my own age and instead hung out at the adult pool bar. My friend and I frequented this bar every day and became friendly with the bartender. But the bartender became a little too friendly with me and would constantly flirt and blow kisses at me. I took these gestures with a grain of salt and saw it as a way to get more business. But his gestures went too far at one point. This pool bar had a public restroom right next to it, so one day, after having a drink or two, I excused myself from my friend to use the restroom. While going to the bathroom, I heard the door open and someone enter a stall. I didn't think much of it until I went out to wash my hands. The restroom was really dark, but this made the situation scarier. While washing my hands, I heard one of the stalls open behind me. I looked up into the mirror only to see the bartender come out of one of the stalls. Besides him, I was the only one in the bathroom. At this point, every siren in my head was going off, but I was in so much shock that this man would follow me into a women's restroom and that I didn't know what to do. At this point, he tried to talk to me, but I dodged him and ran out of the bathroom. My friend later laughed it off, but I never went back to that bar. I should have reported his behavior to the resort, but I was in so much shock that I didn't. Number 2. I'm a 30-year-old female who lives with my fiancé and our 2 dogs. I have 2 huskies. One is 2 and one is 4 months old. My huskies are not guard dogs to save their life. They don't bark or howl. These dogs just love people too much. I have plenty of friends who have walked in on multiple occasions and the dogs don't make a peep. So anyways, it's 8 p.m., it's dark out, I'm home alone, and the fiancé had a hockey game. I'm in the bathroom with the door closed and the blow dryer going, so I can't really hear anything going on around me. That is, until I hear one of the dogs howl. I stop the blow dryer and listen, thinking that the dogs are fighting again. Then I hear a faint knock and the dogs start going ape, barking, howling, jumping into the bay window so bad I thought they'd break it. I'm thinking, what the hell is making them go crazy like that? Maybe a dog or a skunk? I look out my bedroom window as it was the closest view to the front door for me. Well, lo and behold, there's two black men in hoodies, not racist, just giving the description, standing at the front door. They start knocking louder, and this time my 2-year-old husky jumps from the bay window to the front door and starts growling and ramming his body into the door. I'm watching this from my bedroom. As the dog jumps into the door, one of the men jumps back startled, looks at the other guy, and they just walk away. I called my fiance to get home ASAP. I watched them walk away down the road. They weren't selling anything, as they didn't stop at any other houses. I was so creeped out, and still am. Thank goodness for my crazy dogs. Number 1. So, in my hometown, there's a movie theater next to the highway. There's a bridge over that highway that leads to a bus stop. I was walking on the bridge and a guy told me, "Please help me. Please help. My little sister is lost near this movie theater." He had braces and looked like he was maybe around 17 or 18. He was around 6 feet tall and a lot larger than me. I was 19 around this time, and he was pointing to the back parking lot of the theater with no cars. I thought for a moment about helping him, but he had this bugged out, wild look in his eyes. My gut feeling told me no, so I said, "I'm sorry, I have to catch the bus." He then followed me, saying, "Let me look up your dress." I said, "Off!" And he seemed to love me getting angry and instead walked away. He was still kind of lingering around the other side of the bridge, and another girl was walking towards me. I warned her what happened, so she walked with me instead.